The auditorium on Zenthar Prime held over 2,000 cadets. They filled every seat, their bodies representing 12 different species from across the galaxy. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few had skin that shimmered like liquid metal. They all wore the same gray uniform of the Galactic Military Academy, and they all waited in silence. Commander Vexthor stood at the podium. His tall frame reached nearly 8 feet, and his body was covered in dark green scales that had faded with age. 3 eyes sat in a triangular pattern on his face, each one able to move independently. His left arm ended not in a hand, but in a mechanical replacement that gleamed under the auditorium lights. Scars covered his neck and chest, visible even through his formal military dress. He had seen 40 years of war, and his body showed every one of them. The headmaster, an elderly Telvanni with silver skin, stood beside the podium. Her voice carried through the speakers built into every seat. She told the cadets that Commander Vexthor was a decorated officer who had served in 17 major campaigns. She explained that he had commanded fleets, led ground assaults, and trained 3 generations of Krellian warriors. Then she said something that made the entire auditorium go quiet. Commander Vexthor had fought against humanity during the First Human-Galactic War. The cadets began to whisper. Confusion spread through the rows of seats. Most of them had grown up in a galaxy where humans were allies. Earth was a member of the Galactic Coalition. Human ships patrolled the borders alongside Krellian cruisers and Telvanni destroyers. Human soldiers trained at this very academy. Why would they want to hear from someone who had fought against their allies? Vexthor waited for the whispers to die down. When the room fell silent again, he spoke. His voice was deep and rough, like grinding stones. The translator device on his collar turned his words into language each cadet could understand. "I am here today because humans taught me the true meaning of courage," he said. "I am here because I want you to understand what you are fighting alongside, not just who." He pressed a button on the podium, and a hologram appeared above his head. It showed a planet, blue and green with white clouds. Words floated beside it. New Arizona, human colony world, population 50,000. 20 years ago, I received orders from the Zelthani Empire, Vexthor continued. My people, the Krellians, worked as mercenaries back then. We sold our skills to whoever paid the most. The Zelthani paid very well. He explained that the Zelthani Empire wanted to expand their territory. New Arizona sat on the edge of their space, right where they wanted to build new shipping lanes. The humans who lived there had refused to leave. The Zelthani hired the Krellians to remove them. Intelligence reports told us everything we needed to know, Vexthor said. The colony had 50,000 civilians. Most were miners and farmers. They had no military base, no defensive fleet, no orbital weapons. A few hundred owned personal firearms for hunting. That was all. The hologram changed to show Vexthor's fleet. 50 ships hung in the darkness of space. Battle cruisers, destroyers, troop carriers, and support vessels. The cadets could see the firepower, the armor, the technology that made Krellian ships feared across the galaxy. My tactical officers assured me the operation would take 3 days, Vexthor said. Day 1, we would arrive and demand surrender. Day 2, we would land troops and secure the settlements. Day 3, we would load the civilians onto transport ships and deliver them to a Zelthani processing station. He paused. His 3 eyes moved slowly across the auditorium, looking at the faces of the young cadets. Some looked curious, others looked uncomfortable. A few human cadets in the back rows sat very still, their faces carefully neutral. It took 8 months, Vexthor said quietly. I lost 3/4 of my fleet. Over 4,000 soldiers died. And in the end, I withdrew without completing my mission. The silence in the auditorium was complete. Even the cadets who had been shifting in their seats now sat frozen. The number didn't make sense. How could 50,000 civilians with no military force defeat a professional mercenary fleet? Vexthor changed the hologram again. This time it showed a recording from a helmet camera. The view showed dark tunnels carved through rock. Emergency lights flickered on distant walls. The sound of breathing came through the speakers, heavy and scared. "This is from one of my soldiers," Vexthor said. His name was Krelix. He was 23 years old. He had survived campaigns against the Mordaki Hive, the Selenite clans, and the Vortan Uprising. He died in a mining tunnel on New Arizona, 3 months into what should have been a 3-day operation. The video showed Krelix moving through the tunnel with his squad. 12 Krellian soldiers, fully armored, carrying weapons that could punch through steel. They moved in perfect formation, just like they had been trained. They checked corners, scanned for heat signatures, communicated in short, professional bursts. The explosion came without warning. The tunnel ahead simply vanished in fire and flying rock. The camera spun wildly. Screams filled the speakers. Then the feed cut to black. "Humans did that," Vexthor said. "Not soldiers, miners, people who spent their lives digging ore out of rock. They knew those tunnels better than we knew our own ships. They turned their workplace into a weapon." He explained how the humans had abandoned their surface settlements before the Krellian fleet even arrived. They had taken everything useful and disappeared into the mines. The mining tunnels went deep into the planet, hundreds of levels connected by thousands of passages. The humans knew every tunnel, every shaft, every emergency exit. "We thought we would seal the tunnels and wait for them to run out of food," Vexthor said. But they had been preparing for months. They had stored supplies throughout the tunnel system. They had water from underground sources. They had air recyclers taken from their mining equipment. They could survive down there for years. The hologram showed a tactical map of the tunnel system. Red lines marked where Krellian forces had entered. Blue lines showed where humans had set up defensive positions. The cadets could see that the blue lines formed a maze, forcing any attacker to move through narrow passages where superior numbers meant nothing. "My officers told me we should send in our troops," Vexthor continued. "They said our soldiers had better armor, better weapons, better training. They said miners and farmers could not stand against Krellian warriors." He looked down at his mechanical hand. The fingers opened and closed slowly, servos whirring softly in the quiet auditorium. "They were wrong," he said. "We sent in our best troops, elite shock battalions, veterans of a dozen campaigns. The humans destroyed them. Not quickly, not in open battle, slowly. One tunnel at a time, one trap at a time, one ambush at a time." The hologram changed again, showing casualty reports. Numbers scrolled past, each one representing a Krellian soldier who had died in the tunnels. The list went on and on. The cadets watched the numbers climb. The hologram above Vexthor's head changed to show the interior of a mine. The walls were rough stone, carved by machines and explosives. Metal support beams held up the ceiling every few meters. Power cables ran along the walls, feeding lights that turned the darkness into dim twilight. Vexthor explained that New Arizona had been a mining colony for 30 years before the war started. The planet had rich deposits of rare metals needed for ship construction and electronics. Thousands of families had moved there to work the mines. They had built towns on the surface, but they spent most of their time underground, digging deeper every year. "When my fleet arrived, we expected to find frightened civilians," Vexthor said. "Instead, we found empty buildings. The humans had disappeared. It took us 2 days to realize they had gone into the mines." He showed footage from his ship's sensors. The images showed heat signatures deep underground, thousands of them, spread throughout the tunnel system. His tactical officers had marked the largest concentrations. Those would be the primary targets when the ground assault began. "We sent in our first teams on day 3, Vexthor continued. 200 soldiers, split into 20 squads. Their mission was simple: secure the upper tunnels, establish a perimeter, and prepare for the main force to arrive. The hologram showed the Krellian soldiers entering the mines. They moved confidently, their armor gleaming in the harsh lights of their helmet lamps. They carried weapons designed to penetrate heavy armor. They had scanners that could detect heat, motion, and even breathing from 100 meters away. The first trap hit them within an hour. A tunnel collapsed, burying 12 soldiers under tons of rock. The humans had placed explosives in the support beams and triggered them remotely. The Krellians had walked right past the charges without detecting them. "That should have warned us," Vexthor said. "But we thought it was luck. One successful trap did not mean the humans knew what they were doing. We sent in more soldiers to rescue the buried squad and continue the advance." The second trap was worse. A group of soldiers followed their scanners to what looked like a large human gathering. The heat signatures were clear. Dozens of humans clustered together in a central chamber. The Krellian squad approached carefully, weapons ready, preparing to capture prisoners. The chamber was empty. The heat signatures came from industrial equipment that the humans had left running. Heaters, generators, and mining machines, all giving off thermal readings that looked like people. While the Krellian soldiers searched the empty room, humans attacked from tunnels the scanners had not shown. Tunnels that had been blocked by lead-lined doors that concealed everything behind them. 15 more Krellian soldiers died in that ambush. The rest retreated, carrying their wounded, while human defenders disappeared back into passages that seemed to vanish into solid rock. "We learned that the humans had spent 30 years mapping those mines," Vexthor explained. "They knew every tunnel, every shaft, every air vent. They knew which passages appeared on official maps and which ones did not. They knew where to hide, where to attack, and where to run." The hologram showed a three-dimensional map of the tunnel system. Official passages appeared in white, but then red lines started appearing, showing tunnels that were not on any map. Unofficial passages that miners had dug to reach new deposits or create shortcuts. Emergency exits that were not recorded in the colony database. Natural cave systems that intersected with the artificial tunnels. The red lines outnumbered the white ones. The official map showed perhaps 20% of the actual tunnel system. "My tactical officers told me we needed to map the entire system before we could proceed," Vexthor said. "They estimated it would take 6 months. I told them we did not have 6 months. The Zelthani were paying for results, not delays." He ordered his soldiers to advance despite the incomplete maps. They would learn the tunnels by moving through them. They would find the humans by searching every passage. They would win through superior firepower and discipline. The humans had other plans. They had spent months preparing for this fight. Engineers like Danny Cooper and Ben Hayes had turned the mines into a fortress. They had rigged explosives throughout the tunnel system. They had created false walls that looked like solid rock, but could be blown open to reveal hidden passages. They had installed remote sensors that told them where every Krellian soldier was at all times. And they had fighters. Not professional soldiers, but people who knew how to survive underground. Former military personnel like Jake Morrison and Chris Palmer organized the defense. They trained miners and farmers to fight in the darkness. They taught them to use the terrain, to think three-dimensionally, to turn every advantage of the tunnels into a weapon. "One of my officers captured a human transmission," Vexthor said. "It was sent on an emergency frequency, encrypted with civilian-grade security that took us minutes to break." The hologram displayed text instead of images. The words appeared in Galactic Standard, translated from the original English. Vexthor read them aloud. "All units, this is Morrison. They're pushing into Sector 7. Teams 3 and 5, fall back to Checkpoint Baker. Team 9, circle around and hit them from Tunnel J47. Remember, we don't need to win. We just need to make them bleed for every meter." Vexthor explained that this message revealed the human strategy. They were not trying to defeat the Krellian force in open battle. They knew they could not win that fight. Instead, they were trading space for time, making the Krellians pay dearly for every tunnel they captured. "For every meter we advanced, we lost soldiers," Vexthor said. "Cave-ins, ambushes, explosive traps. The humans even used mining equipment as weapons. They would rig drilling machines to activate remotely, bringing down entire sections of tunnel on top of my soldiers." The hologram showed casualty reports again. The numbers climbed day by day, week by week. The Krellian forces were winning in terms of territory. They were capturing tunnels and pushing deeper into the mines. But they were losing soldiers faster than they could replace them. After 2 months, Vexthor had lost over 1,000 soldiers and controlled less than 30% of the tunnel system. His superiors demanded an explanation. He told them the truth. The humans were better at underground fighting than anyone had anticipated. The tunnels negated every advantage the Krellians had. Numbers did not matter when you could only fit 3 soldiers abreast in a passage. Advanced weapons did not matter when explosives could bring down the ceiling. Better training did not matter when the enemy knew every hiding spot and escape route. "My superiors told me to finish the job," Vexthor said. "They told me to use whatever methods necessary. They suggested sealing the tunnels and pumping in toxic gas. They suggested flooding the mines. They suggested orbital bombardment to collapse the entire system." He had refused all of those options. They would have killed every human in the mines, including women and children. The Zelthani wanted the planet, not a tomb. And Vexthor, despite his orders, despite his losses, could not bring himself to commit wholesale slaughter. "That was when we intercepted another transmission," Vexthor said quietly. "This one was not military. It was personal." The hologram displayed a video. A human woman appeared, middle-aged with dirt on her face and exhaustion in her eyes. She sat in a small room carved from stone, lit by a single electric lamp. Behind her, the sound of distant explosions echoed through the tunnels. "Her name was Lisa Graham," Vexthor said. "She was a mining engineer. She had 2 children, ages 8 and 11. This message was recorded 3 hours before she died." In the video, Lisa looked directly at the camera. She spoke calmly, her voice steady despite the fear that was clearly visible in her eyes. She told her children that she loved them. She told them she was sorry she would not see them grow up. She told them to be strong, to take care of each other, to remember that she fought for them. Then she explained what she was about to do. She and 15 other defenders were in a section of tunnel that the Krellians needed to advance. If the Krellians captured that section, they would be able to push through to where hundreds of civilians were sheltering. So Lisa and her team were going to collapse that entire section. They had rigged explosives throughout the support structure. When the Krellians entered, they would bring down half a kilometer of tunnel on top of them, and on themselves. There was no escape route, no way out. They would die along with the Krellian soldiers. "She said it was worth it," Vexthor told the silent auditorium. "She said some tea." Vexthor took a moment to drink from a container of water. His 3 eyes moved slowly across the auditorium, observing the reactions of the cadets. Some looked shaken by the story of New Arizona. Others looked thoughtful. The human cadets in the back rows sat very still, their faces showing a mixture of pride and sorrow. When Vexthor set down his water, he pressed another button on the podium. The hologram changed to show a space station. It was not large or impressive. The station was a simple cylinder, perhaps 200 meters long, with docking ports on each end and solar panels extending from its sides. Text appeared beside it. "Charlie Station, Supply and Medical Facility, Personnel 300. My second story takes place 4 months after New Arizona," Vexthor began. By this time, the war had expanded. The Zelthani Empire had hired more mercenary forces, and the conflict spread to 3 more human colony systems. My fleet was blockading Earth itself, preventing supply ships from reaching the outer colonies. He explained that Charlie Station was one of dozens of small facilities that orbited Earth. It had no weapons. Its shields were only strong enough to protect against micrometeorites and solar radiation. The station's purpose was simple. It stored supplies and provided medical care for ships that passed through the area. "We detected a human ship approaching the station," Vexthor continued. "A destroyer-class vessel called the Defiant. Our sensors showed significant damage. Hull breaches, weapons offline, engines operating at 40% capacity. The ship had been in a battle and barely survived." The hologram showed the Defiant limping through space. Scorch marks covered its hull. Atmosphere vented from holes in its side, creating small clouds of frozen gas that trailed behind it. The ship moved slowly, struggling to maintain course toward Charlie Station. Vexthor's battlecruiser had been the closest ship to intercept. He ordered his crew to position themselves between the Defiant and the station. He powered up weapons and locked targeting systems onto both the destroyer and Charlie Station. Then he opened a communication channel and demanded surrender. "The station commander responded," Vexthor said. "His name was Ryan Fletcher. He was 42 years old, a logistics officer with 15 years of service. He had never seen combat before this war." The hologram displayed Ryan Fletcher's face. He was an average-looking human with short brown hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple uniform with a commander's insignia on the collar. Behind him, other humans moved through the station corridors, visible through the windows of the command center. "Commander Fletcher acknowledged our demands," Vexthor said. "He confirmed that his station had no weapons and could not fight back. He confirmed that he understood we could destroy the station at any time. Then he politely declined to surrender." The cadets stirred. Confusion rippled through the auditorium. Why would a commander refuse to surrender when facing certain destruction? It made no sense. Vexthor played the recording of Fletcher's response. The human's voice was calm and professional, with only the slightest hint of tension. "Commander Vexthor, I understand your position. However, the Defiant is carrying 200 wounded soldiers from a recent engagement at Luna Base. Our station has the medical facilities they need. I am requesting that you allow the Defiant to dock, transfer the wounded, and receive emergency medical treatment. After that, I will consider your surrender terms." Vexthor had refused. He told Fletcher that the Defiant would not dock. Both the ship and the station had 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or he would open fire. "I expected them to surrender immediately," Vexthor told the cadets. "What else could they do? They had no weapons, no way to fight back, no possibility of escape. Logic dictated surrender." But humans, he had learned on New Arizona, did not always follow logic when other values were involved. The hologram showed what happened next. Charlie Station's maneuvering thrusters fired. These were tiny rockets designed only to make small adjustments to the station's position. They were never meant to actually move the massive facility through space, but the humans fired them anyway. Slowly, impossibly slowly, Charlie Station began to move. It accelerated toward Vexthor's battlecruiser at a speed barely faster than a walking pace. But in the emptiness of space, any motion mattered. "They put themselves between my ship and the Defiant," Vexthor said. "The station moved into my line of fire. If I wanted to destroy the Defiant, I would have to shoot through Charlie Station first." The tactical display showed the geometry clearly. Charlie Station now blocked every weapon on Vexthor's battlecruiser. The Defiant continued moving toward the station, protected by 300 humans who had volunteered to become a shield. "I contacted Fletcher again," Vexthor said. "I told him to move his station back to its original position. I told him that he was committing suicide. I told him that his actions would not save the Defiant. They would only add 300 more deaths to the day's count." The hologram showed Fletcher's response. The human commander sat calmly in his chair. His hands folded on the desk in front of him. Behind him, crew members worked at their stations, their faces calm despite the death that was locked onto their home. "Commander Vexthor," Fletcher had said, "my station contains critical medical supplies and wounded non-combatants. Under galactic law, specifically the Warfare Conventions of 2347, firing on a medical facility constitutes a war crime. I am formally notifying you that Charlie Station is now designated as a protected medical facility under Article 7 of those conventions. Vexathor explained to the cadets that Fletcher was technically correct. The Warfare Conventions did protect medical facilities, but those protections only applied if the facility was clearly marked, not actively participating in combat, and not shielding military vessels. I told Fletcher that his station was shielding a military target, Vexathor said. I told him that he had forfeited his protected status. I told him I would give him 5 minutes to move, and then I would fire. What happened in those 5 minutes changed everything. A new voice came over the communication channel. A woman named Kate Sullivan, the station's head nurse. She did not ask for mercy. She did not beg for her life. Instead, she made a statement that was broadcast on all channels, recorded by every ship in the area, and transmitted to both Krellian and human command centers. The hologram displayed Kate Sullivan. She was young, perhaps 30 years old, with blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore medical scrubs marked with the Red Cross symbol of human medical personnel. Her eyes were steady as she looked at the camera. "My name is Kate Sullivan," she had said. "I am the Chief Medical Officer of Charlie Station. I want to make it clear to everyone listening that what we are doing here is voluntary. Every person on this station has voted to move into the line of fire. We are not soldiers. We are medical personnel, logistics officers, and maintenance crew. But we are also human beings who will not stand by while 200 wounded soldiers die because we were too afraid to help them." She explained that the wounded on the Defiant were in critical condition. Without treatment, most of them would die within hours. Charlie Station had the facilities to save them. It had surgical equipment, intensive care units, and trained medical staff. Everything the wounded needed was right there, just minutes away. "We know Commander Vexathor can destroy us," Kate had continued. "We know we cannot fight back. We know we are going to die if he decides to fire, but we also know that if we do nothing, 200 soldiers will die when we could have saved them. So we have made our choice. We will stay between his guns and the Defiant for as long as it takes to get those wounded soldiers the care they need." Vexathor paused the recording. He looked out at the cadets, his 3 eyes focusing on different sections of the auditorium. "I had a choice to make," he said quietly. "I could fire and destroy the station. I would face war crime charges, but the Zelthani would protect me. Their lawyers would argue that the station had forfeited its protection by shielding a military target. I might face a trial, but I would probably avoid serious punishment. Or he could hold his fire. He could let the Defiant dock with Charlie Station. He could give the humans time to transfer the wounded and provide medical care. But that would mean disobeying his orders. It would mean letting an enemy ship escape. It would mean showing weakness. "I asked my tactical officer for his opinion," Vexathor said. "He told me to fire. He said that 300 humans were choosing to die, so we should let them. He said it was their decision, not ours. He said mercy was a luxury we could not afford in war." Vexathor had stood on his bridge, watching Charlie Station drift slowly toward his ship. He had watched the Defiant crawl closer to its dock. He had thought about Lisa Graham in the tunnels of New Arizona. He had thought about all the humans who had died rather than surrender, rather than abandon their people, rather than choose survival over duty. "I thought about what those 300 people were doing," Vexathor told the cadets. "They were not soldiers trained to sacrifice themselves. They were nurses and cooks and engineers. They were people who had joined the military to help others, not to fight. And they were calmly, quietly offering their lives to save 200 wounded soldiers they had never met." The hologram showed Charlie Station continuing its slow movement. Inside, crew members worked at their stations. Some monitored the thrusters. Others prepared medical facilities for incoming wounded. A few recorded personal messages to their families, just in case, but none of them ran. None of them panicked. None of them begged Vexthor to spare them. "I gave the order to hold fire," Vexthor said. "I let the Defiant dock. I let them transfer the wounded. I gave them 6 hours to stabilize the patients and prepare them for transport. Then I let the Defiant leave with all wounded aboard." His tactical officer had been furious. Other ship commanders in the fleet had demanded explanations. The Zelthani had filed formal complaints. But Vexthor had not changed his decision. "I could not kill 300 people who were willing to die to save others." The atmosphere in the auditorium had changed. The cadets no longer whispered among themselves. They sat in complete silence, focused entirely on Vexthor and his stories. Some leaned forward in their seats. Others had forgotten to take notes. They all waited for him to continue. Vexthor seemed to age before their eyes. His scales looked duller. His mechanical hand moved slowly, as if the joints were stiff. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that had not been there before. "My third story is the hardest to tell," he said. "It happened during the final month of the war. I did not know it was the final month at the time. None of us did. We only knew that both sides were exhausted, that casualties were mounting, and that something had to break soon." The hologram changed to show a planet. It was smaller than Earth, with less water and more desert. Cities dotted the continents, connected by roads and rail lines. Text identified it as Carson's World, a human colony of 60,000 people. "The Zelthani wanted this planet," Vexthor explained. "It had strategic value. It sat at a crossroads of several shipping routes. Control of Carson's World meant control of trade in that entire sector. My fleet was ordered to take the planet by any means necessary. The human colonial government had ordered an evacuation. They knew they could not defend the planet against a full Krellian fleet. They had organized transport ships to carry civilians to safer systems. But evacuation took time. Loading 60,000 people onto ships, especially when half of them were children or elderly, was not a quick process. The evacuation route led through a mountain pass. It was the only road that connected the main cities to the spaceport. If the Krellians controlled that pass, the evacuation would fail. Thousands of civilians would be trapped. "So, the humans built a firebase," Vexthor said. "A temporary military installation designed to hold the pass long enough for the evacuation to complete. Intelligence estimated they would need 2 weeks. The hologram showed Firebase Alpha. It was not impressive. The humans had constructed it in 3 days, using prefabricated materials and local resources. Concrete barriers formed a perimeter. Gun positions covered the approaches. A small command center sat in the middle, reinforced with sandbags and metal plates. The whole installation covered perhaps 200 square meters. 60 soldiers defended that fire base, Vexthor said, against my remaining force of 3,000. The tactical situation was absurd. They had no artillery support, no air cover, no reinforcements. They had exactly what they could carry or build themselves. The firebase commander was a Marine captain named Eric Stone. Vexthor displayed his image on the hologram. Stone was in his mid-30s, with dark hair and a face that showed the stress of too many battles. He wore combat fatigues marked with the insignia of the human colonial Marines. I followed protocol, Vexthor said. I contacted Stone and offered him terms. Surrender the firebase and withdraw. His soldiers would be treated as prisoners of war according to galactic conventions. They would not be harmed. When the war ended, they would be returned to human territory. The hologram played the recording of Stone's response. The human captain stood in his command center, maps and tactical displays visible behind him. His face was calm, almost peaceful. When he spoke, his voice carried no fear and no anger, only certainty. Negative, Commander Vexthor. We will hold this position. If you want this firebase, you will have to take it. Then Stone had added something that would become famous in both human and Krellian military history. 4 words that every officer in the Galactic Coalition now knew. Come and take it. Vexthor had given Stone's forces a full day to reconsider. He positioned his troops around the fire base but did not attack. He sent more messages offering surrender. He even explained that the fire base could not possibly hold for 2 weeks against his force. Resistance was pointless. Stone had responded each time with the same 4 words. Come and take it. So we attacked, Vexthor said quietly. The hologram showed the assault. Krellian soldiers advanced up the mountain road in formation. They had armor, heavy weapons, and numerical superiority. The firebase defenders had elevated positions, prepared defenses, and perfect knowledge of the terrain. The humans opened fire at maximum range. Vexthor explained that their snipers were exceptional. 2 soldiers, Laura Martinez and Kevin Drake, had been competitive marksmen before the war. They could hit targets at distances that seemed impossible. Every shot found its mark. Every shot killed or severely wounded a Krellian soldier. We lost 40 soldiers in the first assault, Vexthor said. We pulled back to regroup. The second assault came at night. Krellian forces had superior night vision equipment. They could see in darkness that blinded human eyes. But the humans had prepared for this. They had seeded the approach with sensors and tripwires. They had zeroed their weapons on specific points during daylight. When the Krellian soldiers advanced in darkness, the humans knew exactly where they were. Flares lit up the night. Pre-positioned explosives detonated. Human soldiers fired at targets they could not see but knew were there. The second assault cost Vexthor 60 more soldiers. We tried everything, Vexthor told the cadets. Artillery bombardment, but the firebase was too well dug in. Airstrikes, but the humans had anti-aircraft missiles. Encirclement, but the firebase only needed to hold the pass, not survive a siege. Every tactic we tried, they had an answer for. Days passed. The Krellian casualties mounted. 100 dead, 200, 300. The humans lost soldiers, too. Vexthor watched their numbers drop. 60 defenders became 50, 50 became 40, 40 became 30. Their medic impressed me most, Vexthor said. Her name was Beth Turner. She was 24 years old. She had joined the military to pay for medical school. During the battle, she ran through enemy fire dozens of times to reach wounded soldiers. She dragged them to safety. She treated their injuries while bullets struck the ground around her. The hologram showed brief footage captured by Krellian helmet cameras. A human in medical fatigues ran across open ground while weapons fire tore up the earth around her. She reached a wounded soldier, grabbed him by his armor, and pulled him toward cover. She moved with purpose and speed, never hesitating despite the danger. Beth Turner died on day 9, Vexthor said. A piece of shrapnel from an artillery shell hit her while she was treating a wounded soldier. She bled out in minutes, but before she died, she finished treating the soldier she had been working on. She made sure he would survive before she allowed herself to die. By day 12, only 15 human soldiers remained alive at Firebase Alpha. They had been fighting non-stop for nearly 2 weeks. They were out of medical supplies, low on ammunition, and running on almost no sleep. But they held the line. On day 13, the last civilian transport left the spaceport. The evacuation was complete. Every civilian who wanted to leave Carson's world was safely aboard ships heading to human territory. The firebase had accomplished its mission. That was when Stone contacted me again, Vexthor said. He informed me that the evacuation was complete. He thanked me for the opportunity to serve with such fine soldiers. Then he asked me to make it quick. Vexthor had expected Stone to surrender. The mission was over. There was no reason to keep fighting, but Stone did not offer surrender. He simply asked for a clean death. I gave the order for a final assault, Vexthor said. I sent in 500 soldiers. I wanted overwhelming force. I wanted it to end quickly, as Stone had requested. The hologram showed the last battle. Only 12 human soldiers were able to fight by then. 3 more were wounded too badly to stand, but refused evacuation that they knew would never come. They fought from their positions in the command center. The humans had no ammunition left for their rifles. They fought with pistols until those ran out. Then they fought with knives. When the knives broke or were lost, they fought with rocks, pieces of metal, and their bare hands. They never retreated, Vexthor said. They never surrendered. They died defending a position that had no strategic value anymore. They died because they had been ordered to hold the line, and they would not abandon their posts even when their mission was complete. The last soldier died fighting 3 Krellian warriors simultaneously. He had no weapons. He had wounds that should have killed him hours ago, but he fought until he physically could not move anymore. When the firebase finally fell, Vexthor ordered his soldiers to stand down. He walked through the firebase himself, looking at what the humans had accomplished. 60 soldiers had held off 3,000 for 14 days. They had killed over 400 Krellian soldiers and wounded 1,000 more. They had completed their mission and saved 60,000 civilians. We found messages scratched into the walls, Vexthor said. Words of love to families back home. Jokes between soldiers. A recipe that a soldier named Sam Brooks wanted his daughter to remember him by. The hologram showed these messages. Simple words carved into concrete and metal. Tell Mom I love her. Jake, you still owe me $20. If you find this, tell my son I died proud. Apple pie. 3 cups flour, 1 cup sugar, 6 apples. I ordered the firebase preserved, Vexthor said. It still stands today, exactly as it was on the day it fell. Both human and Krellian veterans maintain it. It has become a memorial, a reminder of what those 60 soldiers did. He explained that he visits the firebase once a year. He walks through the positions where humans fought and died. He reads the messages on the walls. He remembers the faces of the soldiers who killed so many of his own troops. I do not visit to celebrate victory, Vexthor said. I visit to remember defeat, because Firebase Alpha taught me that winning and losing are not always what they seem. We took that firebase. We won that battle. But those 60 humans defeated us in every way that mattered. They accomplished their mission. They saved their people. They died with honor. The hologram faded away, leaving only Vexthor on the stage. He stood silently for a long moment. His Vexthor walked to the front of the stage. He looked out at the assembled cadets, his 3 eyes moving from face to face. The young Telvanni, who had asked the question, waited patiently for his answer. Other cadets leaned forward, curious about how a war against such determined opponents could have ended. The coalition did not defeat humanity, Vexthor said simply. The war ended because the Zelthani Empire collapsed. He explained that the Zelthani had been paying for the war with money they did not have. Their economy was built on corruption and lies. While they hired mercenaries to fight humans, their own government was falling apart from within. Officials stole money meant for the military. Colonies rebelled against unfair taxes. Trade partners refused to do business with them. 6 months into the war, the Zelthani Empire declared bankruptcy, Vexthor said. They could no longer pay my people. They could no longer pay any of the mercenary forces they had hired. Without payment, we had no reason to continue fighting. The Krellian Military Council had ordered an immediate ceasefire. They contacted Human Military Command and requested peace negotiations. The war ended not with a final battle or a peace treaty, but with a simple acknowledgement that neither side had any reason to keep killing each other. We did not lose because humans defeated us in battle, Vexthor continued. We lost because we could not afford to keep fighting them. Every engagement cost us more than we could replace. Every victory was bought with blood and equipment we did not have to spare. Even when we won, we lost. He displayed casualty figures on the hologram. The numbers told the story clearly. In 8 months of fighting, the Krellian forces had lost 40% of their soldiers, 60% of their equipment, and accomplished almost none of their objectives. Human forces had lost fewer soldiers, protected their civilians, and held almost all their territory. More importantly, Vexthor said, we learned that fighting humans was not worth any price. Every battle made them stronger. Every attack made them more determined. We were fighting an enemy that grew more dangerous the more we hurt them. He explained that after the ceasefire, the Krellian Military Council had studied the war carefully. They analyzed every battle, every engagement, every tactical decision. They wanted to understand how they had failed so completely against an enemy that should have been easy to defeat. The answer was uncomfortable but clear. They had not understood what they were fighting against. They had seen human weakness and ignored human strength. They had counted soldiers and weapons, but had not counted determination, courage, and the willingness to sacrifice. We thought humans were like other species, Vexthor said. We thought they would surrender when the cost became too high. We thought they would choose survival over pride. We were wrong about everything. The hologram showed a timeline of the war. Red marks indicated Krellian victories. Blue marks indicated human victories. The cadets could see that the Krellians had won more battles, captured more territory, and achieved more tactical objectives. But the blue marks clustered around population centers, evacuation routes, and strategic resources. The humans had lost battles they did not need to win and won the battles that actually mattered. After the war ended, my government did something unusual, Vexthor said. They invited human military leaders to Krellian space. They asked for meetings, for discussions, for opportunities to learn from their former enemies. The humans had agreed. Officers like Jake Morrison from New Arizona, Ryan Fletcher from Charlie Station, and survivors from Firebase Alpha had traveled to Krellian worlds. They had met with Krellian commanders. They had shared tactical knowledge and military philosophy. That was when I met Commander Fletcher in person, Vexthor said. I apologized for putting him and his crew in danger at Charlie Station. He told me there was nothing to apologize for. He said he had made his choice, and he would make it again. Then he asked me why I had held my fire. Vexthor had struggled to explain. He told Fletcher that he could not bring himself to kill people who were so calmly willing to die for others, that he respected their courage too much to destroy it, that he had learned, watching humans fight, that some things were worth more than victory. Fletcher had simply nodded and said that he understood. Then he had asked if Vexthor would be willing to train Krellian officers to fight alongside humans instead of against them. That conversation changed my life, Vexthor told the cadets. It changed my people's entire military strategy. We realized that humans would make far better allies than enemies. The Krellian government had pushed for human membership in the Galactic Coalition. They had sponsored Earth's application, provided political support, and advocated strongly for human inclusion. Some species had objected, worried about human aggression. But the Krellians had argued that human courage was exactly what the coalition needed. We knew what humans could do, Vexthor explained. We had fought them. We had bled against them. We knew that when humans committed to something, they would not break that commitment. When humans made a promise, they kept it. When humans stood beside you, they would die before they abandoned you. The hologram showed images of modern coalition fleet operations. Human ships flew alongside Krellian cruisers, Telvanni destroyers, and vessels from dozens of other species. Mixed crews worked together. Joint training operations prepared them for coordinated combat. Today, I would rather have 10 human soldiers beside me than 100 from any other species, Vexthor said. Not because humans are better fighters, though many are excellent. Not because humans have superior technology, though they are innovative. but because I know that if the situation becomes desperate, if everything goes wrong, if death seems certain, the humans will not run. They will not surrender. They will not quit. He told the cadets about a recent operation on the border of Coalition space. Pirates had attacked a colony ship carrying families from 3 different species. A Coalition rapid response team had arrived to help. The team included 5 humans, 8 Krellians, and 7 Telvanni. The pirates had outnumbered them 3-1. The Coalition team had been forced to defend the colony ship in a narrow docking bay with no cover and limited ammunition. The situation had looked hopeless. The human team leader, a woman named Susan Harper, had organized the defense, Vexthor said. She put the Krellians in positions where their armor was most effective. She put the Telvanni where their speed gave them advantage. She put the humans in the most dangerous positions, the places where someone would probably die. The pirates had attacked in waves. The Coalition team had held them off for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. 3 soldiers had died in that docking bay. All 3 were human. When I asked Susan Harper why she put her people in the most dangerous positions, she looked at me like I had asked why water was wet, Vexthor said. She told me that humans were best suited for those positions. They could hold longer, fight harder, and refuse to break even when breaking seemed like the only option. She said it was not bravery. It was just what humans did. The hologram changed one final time. It showed the emblem of the Galactic Coalition, with Earth's symbol integrated alongside those of the founding member species. This is why humans are valued in the Coalition, Vexthor said. Not because they are perfect, not because they always win, but because they understand something that many species forget. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to act despite fear. It is choosing duty over safety. It is choosing to protect others, even when protection requires sacrifice. He looked directly at the human cadets in the back rows. Your people taught me this lesson at great cost. They taught it to me in tunnels filled with explosives. They taught it to me in space stations that refused to move. They taught it to me in fire bases that should have fallen in hours, but held for weeks. Vexthor's voice grew stronger, more certain. You come from a species that does not know how to quit. You come from people who would rather die than fail their duty. You come from a culture that values courage, honor, and sacrifice above survival. This makes you dangerous enemies, but it makes you invaluable allies. He addressed all the cadets now, not just the humans. When you serve with humans, remember what they are capable of. Remember that their courage is not reckless. It is calculated, purposeful, and absolute. They do not seek death, but they do not fear it either. They fear failure more than dying. They fear abandoning their comrades more than facing impossible odds. The hologram faded away completely. Vexthor stood alone on the empty stage, an old soldier sharing the wisdom he had gained through pain and loss. I fought humans for 8 months, he said quietly. I lost thousands of soldiers trying to defeat them. I failed every major objective I was given, but I learned something more valuable than victory. I learned what true courage looks like. I learned that the willingness to sacrifice yourself for others is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. A long silence filled the auditorium. The cadets sat motionless, processing everything they had heard. Vexthor let the silence stretch, giving them time to think. Finally, he spoke again. You will graduate from this academy and serve in the Coalition fleet. You will face danger, hardship, and perhaps war. When those moments come, remember the miners of New Arizona. Remember the crew of Charlie Station. Remember the soldiers of Firebase Alpha. Remember that courage is not about being fearless. It is about choosing to act despite your fear. He paused, his 3 eyes sweeping across the auditorium one last time. And if you find yourself in a desperate situation, fighting against impossible odds, look to the humans beside you. They will show you what courage really means. They will show you how to refuse to quit. They will show you that death before dishonor is not just a saying. For humans, it is a way of life. Vexthor stepped back from the podium. The headmaster stood and began to applaud. The sound started slowly, then grew as more cadets joined in. Soon the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding not just for Vexthor, but for the humans whose stories he had shared. In the back rows, the human cadets stood with tears in their eyes. They applauded for the miners who had died in the tunnels, for the crew who had shielded the wounded, for the soldiers who had held an impossible line, for everyone who had fought and died to protect others. As the applause continued, a young human cadet made her way down to the stage. Her name was Nicole Palmer. Her father, Chris Palmer, had been one of the defenders in the tunnels of New Arizona. He had survived the war, but died 5 years later from injuries he sustained in the mines. Vexthor saw her approaching. He stepped down from the stage to meet her. She stopped in front of him, looking up at the alien commander who had fought against her father. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for honoring their memory." Vexthor placed his clawed hand gently on her shoulder. "Your father saved many lives in those tunnels," he said, "including several of my soldiers who were trapped by a cave-in. He could have left them to die. Instead, he organized a rescue operation that saved 14 Krellian soldiers." Nicole's eyes widened. She had not known this part of her father's story. Vexthor continued, "I met your father after the war. He told me that he fought not because he hated Krellians, but because he loved his children. He said the only way to protect what you love is to be willing to fight for it." Tears ran down Nicole's face. Vexthor kept his hand on her shoulder, offering what comfort he could. Around them, cadets from a dozen species watched this moment between former enemies, now united in respect for the fallen. "Your father's courage," Vexthor said softly, "is why I am here today. His courage is why Krellians fight alongside humans instead of against them. His courage, and the courage of thousands like him, changed the galaxy." He looked up at all the assembled cadets. "Never forget that courage has consequences. The courage of a few can inspire many. The courage of many can change everything. This is the true lesson of the human galactic war. Not that humans are dangerous, though they are. Not that humans are stubborn, though they are. But that human courage, properly directed, can make the impossible possible." The applause began again, louder this time. Vexthor stood with his hand on Nicole Palmer's shoulder. An old warrior who had learned his most important lessons from those he had once called enemies, now proud to call them allies. 3 eyes unfocused, lost in memory. "That is the third thing you need to understand about humans," he finally said. "They do not know how to quit. Even when the battle is lost, even when death is certain, even when there is no hope and no possibility of victory, they keep fighting. Not because they are stupid or blind to reality, but because giving up, surrendering, quitting, these things are not in their nature. They will fight until they physically cannot fight anymore. And sometimes they will keep fighting even after that." A cadet raised her hand. She was young, a Telvanni with silver skin and large eyes. When Vexthor acknowledged her, she asked the question that many were thinking. "Commander, if humans are so formidable, how did the war end? Did the Galactic Coalition find a way to defeat them?" Vexthor's expression might have been a smile. It was hard to tell with Krellian features. "That is an excellent question," he said. "And the answer will surprise you," explained to the cadets. "I had the power to destroy them. I had the legal justification to destroy them. I had orders that supported destroying them. But I could not do it." He explained that he had been reprimanded for his decision. His superiors had questioned his commitment. Some had suggested he was becoming soft, that he was losing his edge. But none of them had been there. None of them had watched 300 unarmed people calmly position themselves in front of loaded weapons to protect wounded soldiers. "Charlie Station survived the war," Vex Thor said. "It is still in operation today, still providing medical care to ships that need it. Ryan Fletcher retired 2 years ago. Kate Sullivan is now the station commander. And every year on the anniversary of that day, both humans and Krellians visit the station to remember what happened there." The hologram showed a plaque mounted on the station's hull. Words were engraved in both English and Galactic Standard. Here, 300 stood for 200. Here, courage needed no weapons. Vex Thor looked at the human cadets in the back rows. "That is the second thing you need to understand about humans," he said. "They will sacrifice themselves for strangers. Not because they are ordered to, not because they expect reward, but because they believe some things are more important than their own survival. Duty is one of those things. Honor is another, and the life of a wounded soldier is worth more than 300 people standing safely aside. Hings were worth dying for. Protecting her children was one of them." The video ended. Lisa Graham smiled at the camera, blew a kiss to her children, and reached forward to turn off the recording. 6 hours later, she kept her promise, Vex Thor said. "She waited until 60 of my soldiers entered that tunnel section. Then she triggered the explosives. The entire section collapsed. 60 Krellian soldiers died instantly. So did Lisa Graham and 15 other human defenders." He explained that this was not an isolated incident. Throughout the tunnel fighting, humans had sacrificed themselves to hold key positions, to protect civilians, to buy time for others to escape. They did not surrender. They did not retreat, when retreat meant abandoning others. They fought until they died, and then their friends fought over their bodies. After 3 months and 2,000 casualties, Vex Thor ordered his forces to withdraw from the tunnels. The cost was too high. The strategic value was too low. He had failed his mission, but he had learned something far more valuable. "I learned that humans will die for each other," Vex Thor said to the cadets. "Not because they are suicidal, not because they do not value their own lives, but because they value some things more than their own survival. Family, freedom, home. They will die to protect these things." The hologram faded, leaving Vex Thor standing alone on the stage. He looked tired, as if telling this story had aged him years. "That is the first thing you need to understand about fighting alongside humans," he said. "They are brave not because they do not fear death. They are brave because they fear failing the people they love more than they fear dying. And dread dead. 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. After 3 months, I ordered my forces out of the tunnels," Vex Thor said. "I had lost 2,000 soldiers trying to dislodge 5,000 humans from their minds. That is when I realized something important." He stepped away from the podium and stood at the edge of the stage. His 3 eyes swept across the cadets one more time. "I realized that I did not understand humans at all," he said. "And I realized that my ignorance had killed 2,000 of my soldiers. So I decided to learn. I studied every engagement. I reviewed every recording. I analyzed every human transmission we had intercepted. And what I learned changed everything I thought I knew about courage." The headmaster stood and thanked Commander Vex Thor for the introduction. She told the cadets that they would hear 3 stories today. 3 examples of human courage that every officer in the Galactic Coalition should understand. Then she sat down and let Vex Thor continue. The commander walked slowly across the stage. His footsteps echoed in the silent auditorium. When he reached the center, he stopped and looked up at the humans sitting in the back rows. "I want to tell you about the people who beat me," he said. "I want to tell you about the miners of New Arizona.